The Wall Street Journal just published an article called How to Be Funny, Not Offensive at Work. I'm a stand-up comedian with a 13-year corporate career in international human resources. Let's talk about this article, what they got right and what they got wrong about using humor at work. There's a link to the Wall Street Journal article in the description below this video. There's also a link to my stand-up comedy class if you want to learn how to be funny on stage. Before the article gets to specific tips on how to use humor in the workplace, they talk about humor as a key leadership quality. Quote, "The ideal is to pull off a punchline that is both appropriate and hilarious. Do that, and people will see you as more confident, competent, and intelligent." The article also cites an interesting group experiment. Quote, "Having someone tell a good joke made them significantly more likely to be selected as the group leader. An indication that we bestow funny people with higher status." End quote. I think this is an excellent point about humor as a leadership quality. If you think back to the best leaders that you've ever worked with, I bet that they were funny people. So we should keep this leadership aspect of humor in mind as we look at the rest of these tips, especially the ones that don't make any sense in this context. Now let's look at 3 specific tips that the Wall Street Journal article quotes. And 2 of them are under the heading Safe for Work, how to nail the punchline and keep it appropriate for colleagues. The first tip here is to never punch down. Quote, "Don't punch down. Don't take aim at people below you in the office hierarchy," end quote. And this is excellent advice, and this is also something that we as stand-up comedians adhere to. If you're going to be making fun of other people, always make sure to punch up. And punching up means that you're making fun of people who are at a higher status than yourself. This is why it's more appropriate to make fun of celebrities, politicians, or the CEO of the company, because you're always punching up. It's much more acceptable. Punching down, which you shouldn't do, could mean making fun of people who are below you in the office hierarchy, like the article is talking about, but also about social status in general. You should always be punching up if you want to make good jokes. Another related tip in the article is that you should not use self-deprecating humor, and I have to disagree here a little bit. If you make fun of yourself or your own group, that will actually give you license to make fun of other things and other groups as well. So it's not a total no-no on self-deprecating humor, in my opinion. Now let's get to the second tip from the article, which is where the terrible advice starts. Quote, "Test your jokes. Run them by trusted friends or coworkers to see if they are actually funny or instead prone to unintended interpretation." This is terrible advice from the Wall Street Journal. This is not how humor works. We're not going to sit at home writing jokes that we're then going to test at the office. No, rather, humor comes across in conversation when you're engaging with actual human beings and you make the jokes up as you go along. Now, we as stand-up comedians, we do sit at home writing jokes, but that's when we're getting ready to perform them on the stage, which is very different than telling a few jokes at the office. This also relates to the leadership qualities that we talked about before. Leaders take risks. They're not going to sit in their office, write a joke, try it on their assistant, and then only share it with the other employees. No, a great leader, he's going to tell a joke. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, also not a big deal. Leaders take risks, and they are ready to deal with the consequences. One of those risks is these unintended interpretations that the article mentions, but you're always going to have unintended interpretations in whatever you do. Terrible advice, Wall Street Journal. Are you getting value? Hit the like button. Tip number 3 that I want to talk about is in the beginning of the article where they talk about what kind of humor is appropriate for the workplace. Quote, "It's not that hard. Just don't make fun of anyone's basic identity or background." Now, I understand what they're trying to say here, but the way they formulated it is far too broad and far too generalized. I am originally from Sweden and I live in Switzerland. And no, I also don't know the difference between these two countries. But listen, if I got upset every time somebody makes an IKEA joke just because I'm from Sweden, I would lose my mind. Especially in an international environment, it's unavoidable that people are going to be making fun of your national origin, and it's perfectly fair game so long as it's funny. That initial tip of not making fun of anybody's identity is an example of how anxious this Wall Street Journal article is. There's an even better example from the top of the article. Quote, "What are we supposed to do amid a deeply unfunny public health crisis and exceedingly serious national conversation around politics and race? At a moment when so many of us could use a laugh, we're all terrified of stumbling." Let me read that last line again. We're all terrified of stumbling. I really hope that this does not accurately reflect the American workplace in this day and age. We're all terrified of stumbling, just for a joke, sounds miserable. Now, it's clear that this article was written from an American perspective, which brings me over to the differences in legal context, especially when it relates to labor law in the US and in Europe. Now, you should not be taking legal advice from some guy on YouTube. I can't even say that I'm not a lawyer because I actually have a law degree, but this is #not legal advice. The article gives the following example from somebody who has posted something inappropriate on social media. Quote, "Best case scenario, they promise to never go on Twitter again. Worst case scenario, they also lose their job and are publicly shamed." End quote. Now, unfortunately, losing your job can be a real consequence of making an inappropriate joke in the US, because in the US they have employment at will. And in principle, it means that the employment relationship continues so long as both parties will it, the employer and the employee. And in practice, it means that the employee can leave at any point and the employer can dismiss the employee at any point, and they don't have to cite any specific reason. There are, of course, exceptions to this, but this is broadly how it works. The labor laws here in Europe are a lot different, and we have much stronger worker protections. So it would be scandalous if an employee was dismissed just because of something that they said. At a minimum, you would have to give them 3 months' notice in a typical company here in Switzerland, and in many European countries, there is no way that you could terminate an employee just because of an inappropriate joke. In just a moment, I'm going to move over to my bonus tip about the difference between funny and offensive. If you've been getting some value from this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I post a new video every Thursday, and they're all about helping you engage better with your audience. It's communication tips from a comedian and an occasional lawyer. And here's that bonus tip for you. The whole premise of this article is how to be funny, not offensive at work. But this conflict between funny and offensive makes no sense to me, because the goal of humor cannot be to not offend. The goal of humor is to be funny. And some offensive humor can be perfectly appropriate. For example, I have always found it a lot more enjoyable to work in places where you can freely express yourself. And that includes using a lot of humor. Some of it is going to be offensive, but we can all deal with it. We're all adults. Another aspect of funny versus offensive is that you cannot laugh and be offended at the same time. And the way you apply this is that if you're going to be using offensive humor, make sure that it's also really funny, and then you're able to get away with a lot more. So even though I disagree with some of the tips in this article, I still enjoy the Wall Street Journal. I came across this article on the Audible app, where I listened to the Wall Street Journal Digest. And you can get a 30-day free trial of the Audible app with the link in the description below this video. That trial is going to give you access to thousands of audiobooks. I've been using Audible for more than 10 years, and for me, it's the best way to consume audiobooks. So check out the free trial in the link below. We can actually learn a lot about leadership from the Comedy Club. To find out more, click or tap the screen right here. That's my full playlist about leadership lessons from the Comedy Club. In these videos, I share tips about things that I've learned about introducing a speaker, how to ask for applause, or how to ask audience questions. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.